지진물들도 힘이 장하고는 문은 전부는 게다 다그러다간 잔도 심을도 tumba들지 잔라기 쇼음서.
To benefit beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Today we won't talk about Buddhism. Instead, it's the traditional culture, specifically Confucian thought and the classic of filial piety. I'm going to talk to you about it. I'm not a specialist in this field, so I want to make that clear in advance. If I were discussing Buddhist teachings, I would feel a bit more confident, especially when it comes to the Tibetan Buddhism. But as for the classic of filial piety, it's truly just a deeply personal interest of mine. I've actually had the pleasure of reading it not just once, but on a couple of separate occasions before. Last year, when I embarked on my memorable trip to Switzerland, due to various interesting circumstances that arose at that particular time, I ended up reading several captivating books. Among those books on traditional culture, there was the classic of filial piety. At that time, I had the thought and made the aspiration to share it with everyone. Since then, that aspiration has gradually grown and matured. So today, we are all here to study together. During the process of studying, I have some of my own views. I don't really have any specific lineage or a dedicated teacher in this particular area. According to the proper rituals of transmission, this may not be entirely appropriate, but sometimes it's also perfectly fine for everyone to study together like this. I've observed that in the Western world, many professors and dedicated teachers will often take a particular book they truly enjoy and then proceed to teach it to others. Some people even take certain books on Dzogchen and then teach them to many students, saying, this Dzogchen book is great, I really like it. They even directly explain some teachings that point straight to the nature of mind to everyone, from the perspective of those of us who are professionals in Vajrayana Buddhism. It doesn't seem appropriate to teach in such a direct way, but it's also not our place to say much about it. Similarly, the classic of filial piety is also a very famous and widely recognized classic of traditional culture. This renowned classic, in fact, from a detailed academic perspective, has many different viewpoints and interpretations surrounding it. Therefore, I do not believe it is necessary for me to extensively expound on it here. Perhaps most of you who are present here are already quite very familiar with it indeed. Some of you might be like me, not particularly clear about all the details. But as far as I understand, in fact, the classic of filial piety is also very important for many of us. Some individuals genuinely believe that perhaps it is only truly necessary and essential for young children and not particularly important or crucial for fully grown adults. But in the content we'll discuss next, the so-called filial piety here is not just solely about children being filial and respectful to their parents. It's certainly not limited exclusively to that particular aspect. There is filial piety for emperors, for gentlemen, for kings, and many different categories. The essence of filial piety and the methods it espouses have, throughout history, served as a cornerstone for human development, imbuing individuals with the wisdom to navigate interpersonal relationships, handle social interactions with grace, and forge a complete and admirable character. This is the very reason why it has been held in such high regard and considered a vital component of personal conduct for thousands of years, with its profound influence extending far beyond the borders of China. It seems that nowadays, in this modern era, Westerners also place considerable and significant importance on it. Many of us, perhaps, tend to think that Westerners might be completely at odds with the fundamental concept of filial piety, that it completely contradicts some essential aspects of their culture and societal norms. So that's not the case. In fact, it's not true. It is said that this work has been translated into several English versions, perhaps as many as 6 or 7, in addition to being rendered into many other languages like Japanese, French, and German. Through these various translations, people from different cultures have been able to gain a deeper understanding of the wisdom of ancient sages, with many finding the principles to be profoundly logical and meaningful. Although it may not completely align with certain aspects of their own cultures, whether from a rigorous research perspective or from other viewpoints, or in the context of everyday life, it is widely considered to be very meaningful and significant. It is widely acknowledged by a considerable number of individuals, including many prominent intellectuals and esteemed academics, that this matter is indeed very necessary, and furthermore, they firmly believe it is absolutely essential. Consequently, there remains a substantial amount of ground to thoroughly cover and discuss in detail during our planned session today. Because traditional culture, regardless of which classic or ancient treatise it is, truly holds enduring value. This profound concept was especially cherished and highly valued by the sagacious and discerning people of ancient times. So, just looking at ancient history, this was probably the most widely embraced and profoundly popular. Delving into much of our extensive history, including the revered classic of filial piety, I have observed that many influential figures, such as the illustrious Emperor Taizong and the esteemed Emperor Gaozong of the glorious Tang dynasty, and many other esteemed emperors of the glorious Tang dynasty, also attached great importance to this profound work. Later, during the flourishing Song, the magnificent Ming, and especially the illustrious Qing dynasties, powerful emperors like the sagacious Kangxi and the diligent Yongzheng all meticulously wrote extensive commentaries on it. I have observed that some emperors personally attended lectures by other teachers, and they even wrote many detailed commentaries themselves, providing extensive insights. The classic of filial piety itself is actually quite short, with just over 1,800 characters, but it was highly valued by many people. Throughout history, whether emperors, prime ministers, or high officials, they all attached great importance to it, because when those at the top value something, it goes without saying that everyone else will too. This is also one of the significant and enduring reasons why Confucian culture has always flourished and maintained its influence. However, I think nowadays people probably don't value or appreciate its profound principles as much as they used to. Everyone generally knows the various reasons for this shift. One primary reason might be the profound societal changes that occurred during and immediately surrounding the tumultuous period of the Cultural Revolution. Traditional culture suffered a profound and devastating kind of historical catastrophe. This unfortunate event also played a significant and undeniable role. So, at that particular time, I also became aware of certain matters concerning the situation. Back then, as many of you are undoubtedly aware, the entire traditional culture of our society did indeed experience a considerable degree of suffering and impact. And perhaps in more recent years, there has also been a noticeable and pervasive influence from Western culture. The effect on traditional culture might even be more severe than it was back then. At that time, it seemed that many places, including some temples, whether Confucian temples or Buddhist temples, suffered significant destruction and damage, but in people's hearts there has always been a profound sense of reverence for traditional culture and its enduring values. This includes us Buddhists. In Tibetan regions, many Buddhist temples were destroyed as well, but in people's hearts there was always a particularly strong faith. But now, Western culture, on the surface it seems that not many temples have been destroyed, but in reality for Western culture, its profound impact on the faith within our hearts is truly tremendous. So basically it may be through the powerful influence of this culture that everything could be destroyed in an instant, and that is truly frightening. Also, looking back in history, it should have been during the time of Qin Shi Huang. During that historical period, in an event widely referred to as the burning of books and burying of scholars, all the foundational classical writings and cultural heritage texts were systematically set ablaze and then thrown into pits, where they were completely buried and obliterated. But later it is said that some parts of the classics, like the classic of filial piety, were secretly hidden away by some people and thus survived. Of course, later on it was said that there were different versions of the classic of filial piety as well. Looking at it from a historical perspective, in fact, the classic of filial piety is similar to some other cultural texts, including the Western Bible. These are quite similar in this regard. There are many, many different versions available for this. Even the author of the classic of filial piety that we're discussing now, throughout history there has been considerable debate within academic circles regarding the authorship of this work. Some scholars believe it was written by Confucius, others attribute it to his disciple Zhengzi, or even to his grandson. Furthermore, a few argue for Mencius as the author, while others suggest it was the collaborative work of various other disciples with close ties to Confucius. Some people even believe it wasn't any of these figures, but was fabricated. There are also other opinions. Throughout traditional history, there's been considerable disagreement and speculation within academic circles, with various scholars holding firmly to their own differing perspectives. Nevertheless, the more credible theory points to either Confucius's grandson. For one, there is the blood relationship, and also Confucius's true disciple Zheng Tzi was involved. This is further supported by the fact that Zheng Tzi's own student was Confucius's grandson. So, based on some very careful reasoning, some prominent historians have indeed deduced and concluded that it is very likely that the classic of Filial Piety was written by Confucius's grandson. Of course, as for the true author, historically speaking, indeed, there are still various and differing opinions that continue to exist even to this present day. In any case, actually, for many historical books and ancient texts from that particular era, the true and definitive real author is probably not always entirely clear or easily ascertainable. This kind of complex situation should, in fact, undoubtedly exist and be acknowledged. So when we study it now, it's really hard to make a definitive conclusion about what it actually is, but regardless, it should have already existed by 241 BC. At that time, during the spring and autumn period, some historical books had already quoted the classic of Filial Piety. So generally speaking, many scholars widely believe that it should have already existed and been well known by that particular time. In any case, its content is attributed to the words of Confucius. As we've mentioned before, Confucius lived during the same era as Shakyamuni Buddha. Judging from the historical period when Confucius lived, he lived from approximately 551 to 479 BC, and he lived a total of 72 years. Confucius's role as a historical figure remains consistent. Despite minor disagreements in some records, he was viewed as a sage by his contemporaries and was treated with a reverence akin to that accorded to a bodhisattva or Buddha in the Buddhist tradition. As for the so-called classic, in the classic of Filial Piety, different dynasties gave it different names, but later it became one of the 13 classics. It was probably during the Song dynasty that it was recognized as a Confucian classic. We should truly be aware that it is indeed extremely important in our traditional culture. Of course, to be perfectly honest, during the entire process of explaining it, it truly doesn't feel quite the same as talking about something like Buddhism. Sometimes when we are explaining it through what specific means, sometimes when explaining Buddhist scriptures, I always feel a kind of blessing power. But with this, Confucius was also truly a sage, so there should indeed be some kind of powerful blessing power, right? Because when explaining it, besides the cultural aspect, I also pay special attention to this kind of blessing power. But whether this blessing power exists or not, I don't really know. Maybe it does, something like that perhaps. When we study this, actually I think it's important to study this traditional culture nowadays, including some venerable monks residing in our Larungar here. Sometimes in our discussions we tend to exclusively focus on profound Buddhist concepts such as the ultimate truth, the conventional truth, the enlightened arhats and the bodhisattvas. But when it comes to things truly related to ordinary people, we're not very good at explaining some principles that go beyond our own familiar circles. So from the perspective of the Buddhist community regarding traditional culture, sometimes it's truly necessary to carefully observe and thoroughly learn about it. And now, for all of you living in the 21st century, whether you have personal faith or not, I truly think it's probably quite necessary for you too to genuinely care about and actively pay close attention to traditional culture. It's really, truly important. Because nowadays many people in our contemporary era, just as I previously mentioned earlier, have been significantly influenced by Western culture, consequently, many individuals truly and firmly believe that only Western logical thinking is absolutely and unequivocally correct, and that scientific thinking is entirely reasonable. Aside from that, they feel that much of traditional culture is dispensable. Most people, or at least a considerable number, think this way. If people think like this, we don't rule it out either. In the entire process of learning, we also don't completely and entirely assert that something, traditional culture, is 100% correct. This kind of thinking is entirely acceptable, and we wouldn't dare to claim otherwise. Because, indeed, the ancient and revered classic of filial piety, this important treatise, came into this world a vibrant and developing planet, at least 2003 or even 400 years ago. So, when we carefully examine our global culture today, what was the fundamental and basic way of life for the vast majority of people across the entire world back then? Life was predominantly and essentially based on the crucial practices of agriculture and animal husbandry, forming the bedrock of human civilization. Then this whole structure changed completely, and later it became an industrial society. Now, in this technological era, especially the current age of intelligence and the internet, many aspects of our lifestyles and people's mindsets have all undergone tremendous changes in every respect. So, whether our classics and doctrines can fully and comprehensively keep up with the present, none of us dares to definitively say for sure. But at the very least, there are indeed some truly fine traditions and certain valuable ideas deeply embedded within them. We really might need to pay attention to these. If we don't, many of our family issues and some social problems could all be related to the state of people's hearts to some extent. And this state of mind should be connected to education. Moreover, education has been influenced by some Western ideas. Sometimes after I go there, I really have certain feelings about it. For example, Western culture, including the aspect of filial piety toward parents. I'll talk more about this later. Basically, after the age of 18, they become independent, and parents don't really manage them much, and the kids themselves feel that for the most part they don't have much of a relationship with their parents. It's more like the relationship between friends, and only a very small number of people take care of their parents. So in America, there's often a saying, what is America like? It's a paradise for children, a battlefield for young people, and a grave for the elderly. That's how it's described. Of course, that's not necessarily entirely accurate, but it's a very common saying over there. And in America, as well as in many Western countries, even if their children don't take care of them, they can completely handle it themselves, because their way of life and their traditions have already become like this. In the end, they also find their own ways to get through their later years. I've seen many Chinese immigrants, some of whom have been there for 1 or 2 generations, and they seem to be caught in between, not quite fitting in either way. On one hand, after their children turn 18, they still keep paying for their tuition, not letting them work part-time, and keep supporting them financially. Then the young children have already been significantly influenced by Western cultural ideas. When the children grow up, they basically just take a lot of money from their parents, but they don't really show proper filial piety. And when that happens, the parents often feel a significant amount of resentment, numerous complaints and profound grievances deep inside. They frequently say, I've truly done so much for my child. I spent all my money to put them through college, and now, regrettably, they don't care about me at all. They don't understand their children's world. It has already become an entirely different world, a thoroughly westernized world. At this particular point in time, even between young children and their own parents, there is a truly huge ideological gap. This is because deep down inside, the parents still firmly hold on to their traditional beliefs and values, so-called concepts of filial piety, and have never ever let go of them. After the second, or perhaps even the third generation, by the time they truly reach the third generation, they essentially become Westerners. Many of our young Tibetan children, when they go over there to live, they may just appear to have some Tibetan blood, nothing more than that. But in reality, their mindset and all their ways are exactly the same as those of Westerners. They can fully and completely accept Western culture and its various aspects. So at this point, when we talk about such rich and profound traditional culture in our contemporary world today, perhaps in this modern era nowadays, especially for those who understand both Eastern and Western cultures, there are many contradictions. As I speak, you may also feel that this is unreasonable. The West would never acknowledge this. They think it's wrong. These are ancient ideas, and all can be tolerated. As we study Confucian thought this time, we should adopt a very open-minded approach to accepting it. If you truly feel like criticizing, that's perfectly fine too. If you happen to find certain ideas that is rather hard to accept, we can all openly discuss them together. Next, what are we going to talk about? the character Filial Piety, Jiao, in the classic of Filial Piety. Its character structure is also quite unique in Chinese writing. At the top is the elder, and below are the descendants. Having children is represented in this way. In this profound sense, disciples should always show deep respect to their esteemed teachers. Similarly, children should respect and be truly filial to their beloved elders and seniors. This is the fundamental meaning. Here it is regarded as a classic scripture. According to some of our Tibetan Buddhist scriptures, only the words of the Buddha are called sutras. Generally, the commentaries created by other bodhisattvas and great virtuous masters are referred to as shastra, and there exists a specific distinction between a sutra and a shastra. But in the Han region, including the Platform Sutra of the sixth patriarch, there are other different names for scriptures, so perhaps in ancient times people had special reverence for these Dharma treasures. All these Dharma treasures were referred to as classics or scriptures. So, as I mentioned earlier, this classic of filial piety, the so-called filial piety, may also carry the meaning of compliance or following. It also implies respect as well as the meaning of serving or attending to others. It also encompasses certain moral principles. Its connotations are very profound. It is not merely about being filial to one's parents. Many people think that teaching the classic of filial piety is just for children, should it be taught only to children. In fact, it's not just children who should learn it. Parents should also study it. When I previously taught the standards for being a good student and child, I also hoped that not only children would learn, but that parents would learn together with them. If parents learn together with their children, the results are even better. Many parents in our modern society actually truly don't know how to properly raise their children. Moreover, they themselves may not even know how to be truly filial to their own parents or genuinely respect their teachers, or in other words, in many significant aspects, they truly do not fully understand the profound concept of filial piety. So they should definitely learn and acquire this essential knowledge. You see, nowadays in our modern society, there are unfortunately many so-called problem children who are struggling. In fact, behind these problem children, there may also be problem parents. Because as we sometimes see in the news and other reports, the actions of a child can often be traced back to the behavior of their own parents, highlighting that a child's conduct is, in many cases, a direct reflection of their upbringing. Moreover, when parents are overly indulgent and overly protective of their children, it can ultimately lead to a situation where a child's misconduct is left unchecked and progressively worsens, becoming virtually impossible to prevent. I feel this is a significant issue in contemporary society. As parents themselves, they should also reflect and think about these things. In the past, when we studied the standards for being a good student and child, some parents would learn together with their children. After finishing their studies, in terms of their own behavior and the way they viewed their own parents, there were still some differences. Some people whose parents had already passed away felt especially regretful that when their parents were alive, they hadn't taken good care of them and felt extremely unfilial. There are indeed such cases, and in fact this is also a genuinely positive development. It remains to be seen whether or not Western culture will fully acknowledge this significant aspect, no matter what, generally speaking, in terms of many principles. Respect for one's parents and a profound heart of gratitude toward them are extremely important and deeply valued. This essential principle is emphasized in Buddhism as well, such as in the significant sutra on the difficulty of repaying the kindness of parents. There is also the well-known Ksaitigarbha Sutra, which is specifically about repaying kindness and filial piety, repaying the kindness of one's mother, and there are related historical accounts. There's also the Ulambana Sutra and other such scriptures. They discuss how to properly repay the kindness of parents, and there are indeed many valuable teachings on this significant topic. So while our parents are still alive, it is probably quite necessary for us to truly understand these important principles. If your beloved parents are no longer physically here with you, but you come to fully understand these crucial things and perhaps realize that some of the actions you did in the past were not entirely proper, then it is necessary to sincerely repent on your own. No matter what, actually, while your parents are still alive, it is best not to argue, whether between mother and child or father and child, because once they are gone, you will often recall their virtues. A very good friend of mine, whom I know extremely well, said that after his beloved loved one passed away, when they were alive, he found them annoying every day. There were so many things about each other that they couldn't stand. But once they were gone, he couldn't remember their faults anymore. Every day he would recall how good they were to him, and all their virtues would come to mind. But by then it was already too late. So for myself, sometimes when it really comes to being truly filial to my parents, I always reflect. I feel that I don't really have any regrets. I did fairly well in that regard. But perhaps when it truly comes to fully repaying their profound kindness, I haven't really done quite enough. That's precisely why, in our cherished Tibetan region, especially after one's beloved parents have sadly passed away, people often diligently do many good deeds and accumulate significant merit for them. There are really a great many such practices indeed. Now let's talk about the next part then. I originally planned to speak for just about 30 minutes today, but I haven't even really started yet. The original plan was to cover exactly one chapter per class session, so how precisely should I proceed with this? Well, let's definitely get started now. The classic of filial piety consists of a total of 18 chapters. I think that when we have more time, we can cover one chapter per class. When we have less time, it's also possible to cover 2 chapters in one class, because today there were some things that needed to be discussed beforehand, so we'll just see how things go. The first chapter we'll discuss today is the opening and clarifying the meaning chapter. Right at the beginning, it gives a summary and explanation. It covers the overall meaning and the main points of the text. So what is it like? First, it says, Zhongni was at leisure and Zhangzi was in attendance, where Zhongni is understood to be Confucius, who was simply living and relaxing in his own residence. At that time, his disciple Zhengzi, also known as Zhengshen or simply Zhengzi, was diligently serving him, meaning he was constantly present and learning directly from the esteemed Confucius. Zhengshen, a truly remarkable individual, was widely acknowledged to be a direct descendant of the legendary Yellow Emperor and was celebrated for his exceptionally great virtue. He was particularly renowned for his unwavering filial piety, as prominently mentioned in the highly influential 24 filial exemplars. At that time, Zhengzi was known to have a deep and profound love for his parents, particularly his mother, which is consistent with the popular adage that the hearts of a mother and son are intertwined. There is indeed such a saying, right? Once Zhengzi went up the mountain to chop firewood, and while he was gone, a guest arrived. His mother didn't know what to do. Maybe she didn't know how to receive the guest or something like that. It was the same in my own family in the past. Usually, when the mother went out, the father would be especially worried about guests coming over. When guests came, things were simple in Tibetan areas. They would be served tsampa, and that was enough. My father was rather clumsy and didn't know how to talk to guests. He'd immediately tell us to call our mother back, saying a guest had arrived. He was especially nervous whenever guests came. So at that time, she too was very worried when an important guest arrived. She immediately told Zhangzi to come back right away, but he did not return. Back then, there was probably no way to send a message or a WeChat. So she bit her very own finger. After she had bitten her finger, it began to hurt quite terribly indeed. At that time, Zhangzi was chopping wood on the mountain, and suddenly he felt a sharp pain in his heart. He thought something might have happened to his mother, so he carried the firewood on his back and hurried home. Then his mother said, I just very, very deliberately bit my very own finger. A guest came. Why didn't you come back sooner? So, at that particular time, this was precisely how they communicated, almost telepathically, in this unique and profound way. Nowadays, no matter how incredibly hard we truly bite ourselves, the other person simply cannot feel it at all. I don't know why that is. Some historical accounts say that he was very good to his mother. At that time, Zhengzi was present near Confucius, and then Confucius said, the ancient kings had the highest virtue and essential principles. To bring harmony to the world, the people live in peace. with no resentment between those above and below. Understand? At that time, Confucius said to Zhengzi, he said the former kings here should truly refer to those who lived before that period of time, Nensho, the likes of Yao, Shun, and Yu before Confucius. We've talked about them before, right? These revered ancestors, these former kings, the former kings indeed possessed the highest and most supreme moral principles, the essential and profound secrets of virtue. These truly invaluable secrets could genuinely and deeply win over the hearts of people all over the world. Their hearts could be completely united and devoted. There would be absolutely no scheming or any form of infighting whatsoever, and certainly no mutual disputes or disagreements among them. Furthermore, when all the people diligently applied the profound and valuable secrets we have just mentioned and discussed, they would consistently and perpetually live together in perfect harmony, completely free from all kinds of conflicts or disagreements. From top to bottom, everyone would be free of resentment and hatred, living in great harmony. So do you understand this principle? At that time, Confucius asked him, "Do you know what this principle truly is?" Zhengzi respectfully rose from his seat and said, "I, Shen, am not clever enough. How could I possibly understand it?" At that time, Zhengzi left his seat. He moved away from where he was sitting. Back then, it probably wasn't like sitting on a sofa or a soft carpet as we do now. It wasn't on a stool or chair either. Nowadays, many people are so used to sitting on stools or chairs. There's nothing you can do. Some people, when attending a lecture, because when we attend lectures, there are no chairs. You can observe them stretching one leg and then deliberately extending the other. They are continuously massaging their own knees. It's quite common to see some individuals in the audience engaging in this very same behavior during lengthy lectures. Back then, he promptly got up from his seat and then proceeded to leave his original designated spot. After leaving his seat, he replied, "Here, Shen refers to Zheng Shen or Zheng Zi." He said, "Shen is not clever." Not clever means rather dull, not sharp-witted. This disciple is especially slow-witted, very dull, don't understand. I'm especially slow. Please bless me. Let Manjushri Bodhisattva bless me. I truly don't understand anything at all. Some of us might genuinely be like this, it's true, but some people are actually just pretending, especially in front of the teacher, you know. He said, "I'm so dull. How could I possibly understand these principles? In front of elders, do not show off your abilities. In the standards for being a good student and child, even if you know the answer, you should appear a bit more humble in front of your teachers and elders." If I were to genuinely say that I truly understand, I really would not act in this particular manner. Therefore, even if he does possess a comprehensive knowledge, a diligent disciple should always present themselves in a humble way and not claim to know absolutely everything there is to know. I think this approach is similar to what is described in the Buddhist scriptures, exposing the right shoulder, kneeling on the right knee, joining palms and speaking. In the sutras, it's often Venerable Ananda who immediately and carefully places his flowing robe over his left shoulder and then respectfully joins his palms together. The ancients across various cultures all had this profound kind of custom, demonstrating immense respect, such deeply ingrained traditions. At this point, he says, "I really don't know. I'm especially ignorant. How could I possibly know that there is such a wonderful key method in the world? Such great virtue. How could I know about it?" At this moment, actually, what has been said above is simply put the importance of morality. For everyone in the world, morality is truly important. Without the essential restraint of morality, people everywhere would inevitably fall into utter chaos and disorder. This point is also true. Now, in this modern era, international relations are becoming increasingly and significantly more complicated and intricate. And between people, because there is no moral restraint at all, if people are too pragmatic and too self-centered, it still brings about a great deal of trouble. Unlike the truly altruistic mindset of Mahayana Buddhism, which tolerates and graciously accommodates others, we should genuinely and sincerely want to help others from the very bottom of our hearts. But without this kind of profound altruism, it's very possible that between people, even if several people are just sitting together in a single room, each only thinks of themselves and never considers others at all. It still brings about a very great deal of suffering. We humans ourselves have also created a significant amount of suffering. So, as I mentioned earlier, actually in this entire world, If everyone could live together in harmony and joy with absolutely no resentment at all whatsoever, everyone would live a very happy and fulfilling life, full of joy. This is the kind of way or principle being discussed. But at that time, Zhengzi didn't understand it at all. He thought, I'm too slow-witted as a disciple, I really don't know. So since he didn't possess the necessary knowledge or understanding, Confucius then proceeded to provide him with a brief yet insightful explanation. This explanation is precisely what constitutes the summary part that will be further explored in the following sections. Therefore, what exactly does this concise explanation entail? Here, the great Confucius once said, what is truly called filial piety? If you do not fully understand, I will certainly tell you. The revered Buddha also very often said, now please listen carefully, I will thoroughly explain it to you. So, these kinds of profound ideas in ancient times were actually quite similar and deeply interconnected. He said, if you don't know, there is such a wonderful key in the world, then I need to tell you. What am I going to tell you? The wonderful key I just mentioned, in fact, is this concept of filial piety. This filial piety is truly the root of all virtues and moral conduct. It is also the very origin of teaching. All of our education, for that matter, all of what we do, this should be considered education, right? The fundamental source of all education is indeed this profound principle, making its understanding and application incredibly important. We frequently articulate the timeless wisdom among all virtues, filial piety undeniably comes first. This means that all these admirable virtues, all truly good and commendable qualities, find their deepest and most essential root in the practice of filial piety. Filial piety is very important. Once you have filial piety, it starts with your immediate parents, it then extends to your own cherished family, and subsequently progresses to respected elders, and ultimately all the way to the esteemed ruler of the entire country. If you have this sense of filial piety, it is very good to everyone. But if you lack filial piety, it can indeed be quite dangerous. However, when comparing Eastern and Western cultures at times, nowadays, Confucianism places very great importance on one's own immediate family, and because of cultural reasons, there is a significant and strong emphasis on one's close parents and family. Indeed, looking back through history, filial piety toward parents and parents' strict control over their children from a young age has always been present. Some parents even treat their children as if the parents themselves are already in their 50s, 60s, or even 70s and 80s, but still treat them like they are 5 or 6 years old, telling them, come here, go there, don't do this, don't do that. If they keep nagging like this, it really leads to a lot of conflicts. Actually, after their children grow up, after the age of 16, parents should give them some more space. That would be much better. I really think that Chinese parents' control over their own children, their upbringing, lasts a lifetime. They want to control everything, and that's quite troublesome. They don't give their children any real freedom at all. Many children truly want to go along with their parents' guidance, but the parents are always watching them very closely and carefully. In their parents' eyes, they're always 5 or 6 years old, never having grown up. Just like when they were 5 or 6, don't do this, don't do that. But sometimes parents really shouldn't say things like that. And if the child doesn't quite go along with them, the parents get upset saying, I've raised you all these years. Now that you're educated, are you not going to listen to me anymore? Is that how it is? When it comes to this, parents can get angry very easily because elderly people are already prone to anger. And when it comes to their own children, including some children who live together with their parents, I've seen this happen even among us Buddhists quite often. They all originally aspire to the Mahayana bodhicitta. The mother and father are people who vow to liberate all sentient beings in the world. And the child, too, is someone who vows to liberate all sentient beings in the world. But before they've even started liberating others, they often can't resolve the conflicts among themselves. Both are preparing to liberate all sentient beings, but before they've even begun to do so, they sometimes find it very difficult to handle their own conflicts. This kind of situation does happen. Actually, the reason for this is somewhat related to culture. For example, in the West, some people really do let their children have complete freedom once they turn 18. No matter what they do, it's just too much freedom. I feel that sometimes the Eastern style of discipline is too strict, nagging and controlling all the way to the end. Whereas in the West, they don't care about anything. If you become a beggar, that's perfectly fine. My child can absolutely be a beggar. My child can truly be anything. There are some esteemed university professors where both parents are highly respected university professors. but their children engage in what society considers relatively low-status jobs or behaviors. Their parents are still very happy about it. They say this is their child's freedom and that their child really enjoys doing it. They even tell many people, this is what my child does. But in traditional Eastern culture, that would be considered deeply shameful, an immense embarrassment and dishonor to the entire family. But they would genuinely never think that way. I strongly feel that their perspectives are far too open-minded, while here it's excessively restrictive and rigid. No matter what, the profound principle of filial piety is the foundation of all virtues and moral conduct. Whether it's family education or social education, including formal school education, its fundamental and most important foundation is indeed filial piety. It's just like with our precepts. Just as the earth is the foundation of all movement and stillness, the precepts are the root of all virtues. So all of this education and this is something everyone must remember. Every day there are a few lines here. Filial piety is the root of virtue, the source from which teaching arises. If everyone can remember this line, then when you promote traditional culture in the future, you can confidently cite this as evidence, right? This is just a brief explanation. Next, Confucius asked his disciples to sit down, saying, I want to tell you. Tell you what? To further elaborate on the true meaning of filial piety. Our bodies, our hair, and our skin are received from our parents. Not daring to harm or damage them is the beginning of filial piety. So, what is filial piety? Filial piety has a beginning, and it also has an ultimate goal. So what exactly is its beginning? The human body, including the hair, including the skin, the flesh, and the bones, all of these essential components come from our parents. Everyone frequently recites this profound statement every day, and it's often used in various movies as well. So I don't even need to explain it further, but this precious gift must absolutely not be harmed. Because our bodies are given to us by our parents, they must not be harmed. This is the beginning of filial piety. If you truly understand filial piety, you will indeed know that our very bodies come from our parents. So, for example, in ancient times, even hair was not allowed to be cut. In some ancient stories, not even a single solitary strand of hair could ever be cut. Indeed, there are numerous such compelling examples. Later on, during the Ming, the Yuan, and the Qing dynasties, they also possessed and expressed distinctly different cultural concepts and deeply held beliefs. Looking at earlier history, there were clear differences. But regardless, the point is that our bodies are given to us by our parents, so we must take good care of them. We shouldn't stay up late or spend all day online, as that's bad for our health. We shouldn't eat late-night snacks every day either. If someone lives such an irregular lifestyle, it will certainly have a negative impact on the health, and it's a fact that parents genuinely care about this. If the body is harmed, it brings worry to the parents. If virtue is harmed, it brings shame to the parents. As it says in the standards for being a good student and child, if your body is injured, parents are always extremely worried and deeply concerned. If their child's virtue is damaged or compromised, parents also feel profoundly and deeply ashamed. Actually, in the teachings of Buddhism, we often talk about this very important concept as well. It's also mentioned in the words of my perfect teacher, when a child is sick, parents would rather be sick themselves. They would rather fall ill than let their child suffer. They love their children very dearly. Everyone truly knows this. That's precisely why it explicitly says here, we should always take good care of our precious bodies. What this means is that our bodies are given to us by our parents. Indeed, as it is stated in the Buddhist scripture sutra on the requital of parental kindness, parents contribute their very essence and energy to create a child, and following the birth, their entire mental and physical state undergoes significant changes. Consequently, as children, we truly indeed bring a great deal of pressure and suffering upon our parents. Therefore, not letting ourselves be harmed is one aspect of filial piety. Then the second aspect is truly divided into three distinct parts. He told his disciples to sit properly, saying, I will explain this to you in detail, I will elaborate for you. There are three aspects to this detailed explanation. This is the first one. The second one is, establish yourself and practice the way. Make your name known to future generations, so as to bring honor to your parents. This is the ultimate form of filial piety. What is the ultimate form of filial piety? In fact, it is that you should establish yourself and practice the way. After you have established your own identity, you can truly practice virtue and do very meaningful and truly important things, including starting a family and building a career and doing these kinds of things. Then, when your work is successful and you achieve something, after you have accomplishments, your good reputation spreads far and wide. Your name becomes known, and this kind of reputation is especially important. It is passed down from generation to generation, continuing on into the future. That's why in China, some parents are especially worried when their children become monks or nuns, because there will be no descendants and the family line will end from then on. They feel extremely sad about it, and this is closely related to the culture. For example, Tibetans genuinely feel that if someone becomes a monk, it's not really a particularly big deal at all. Similarly, many Indians also feel that becoming a monk is not a significant or unusual deal, especially for Westerners. For many Westerners, if their children become monks or nuns, it seems that most people are quite casual about it and don't really give it much thought at all. This mainly has to do with cultural differences as well. They feel that if a child becomes a monk, it's as if they have truly lost their beloved child. So how can the parents possibly hold their heads up high in society? How will their family lineage continue and prosper? These are profound questions that many people genuinely have, including the parents themselves, the grandparents, and indeed everyone involved is especially truly and deeply concerned about this significant matter. In a family of someone, especially in Han areas, when someone becomes a monk or nun, that person basically doesn't dare to go home during the new year, because if they do go back, the family hides them away as if they were a precious treasure. They feel that in this regard, people are still very serious about it. However, in today's era, even if someone doesn't become a monk, many people don't care about their descendants as much as before, and this is also true in Han areas. Now, according to some news reports and statistics, basically, many people are increasingly unwilling to get married or have children. In the past, there was the strict one-child policy, but now the current policy officially allows for a second child, a notable development. However, the birth rate is getting lower and lower, even lower than before. So now, many people are quite worried that in the future, the aging population will become more and more serious. While many policies are being considered to ease birth restrictions, they're not having much effect. A recent news story, for instance, mentioned a new policy that would allow for a third child, but some experts argue this will be pointless. This is not a matter of policy, but rather a reflection of the current mindset of the public, as many people feel overwhelmed by immense pressure and are personally reluctant to have more children, a sentiment shared by both men and women. Even if they get married, they don't want children, and if they don't get married, they don't need children either. Now, it's often called a dink family, right? Many individuals are quite willing to live this particular kind of life. But in many Islamic countries, it's not like this at all. They consistently keep having more children. So in the foreseeable future, many Islamic countries, many nations in the Middle East, will indeed become countries where their own people are the clear majority. While in many other countries around the world, their people will become minorities. You can clearly see this phenomenon playing out very evidently in Europe. Europeans used to think that as long as there was quality, it was enough. If you could have outstanding children, then you didn't necessarily need to have many. But now, their overall population is steadily growing larger and larger. As this population significantly increases, the expansive area they cover inevitably gets bigger and bigger. And within the entire whole population, more and more individuals are found to have their distinct faces. So in this complex world, indeed, some people used to genuinely think that becoming a monastic might have a significant and overall impact on their family. Some of our Tibetan scholars have also said before that there are quite a significant number of nuns from Larong Ga, approximately 3,000 of them in total. If each nun were to have, on average, approximately 2 children, then the Tibetan people would have tragically lost 6,000 precious children. We are already an ethnic minority to begin with, you see. So not only does it not benefit the ethnicity, on the contrary, it actually has a certain impact on the continuation of future generations. That's why there is this kind of viewpoint. But in fact, from the perspective of today's culture, even if you don't become a monastic, there's basically not much difference in their lives in terms of having children compared to those who, for various reasons, do become monastics. Many young people, not just in China, are choosing this path. Also in Japan and Singapore, it's the same situation now. And as for the United States and many other countries, that's even more the case. Now, the only exceptions are African and Middle Eastern countries. They still genuinely don't have many stringent restrictions and continue to nurture and develop talent. So, in actual fact, monastics are not actually harming future generations. In the future, if some of you monastics and your family thinks that you are negatively affecting the family, actually there are already many examples around us, and it's not because of becoming a monastic. Even if you don't become a monastic, nowadays many people, sometimes the pressure in the cities is indeed quite high. A lot of people don't feel the need to have children. The other day, I saw a report saying that in Beijing, if you want to raise a child, it takes 7 million yen just to raise one properly. But maybe that's for a child from a more privileged background. Otherwise, it might not necessarily require that much for everyone. However, the reality is that the pressure of raising children in major cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou is immense. In such circumstances, even if you do not become a monastic, you can't help but reveal a kind of hidden wisdom of monastics. This is about filial piety. When it comes to filial piety, the main point is that Confucianism places a great deal of importance on future generations. This is considered the ultimate expression of filial piety. It is considered essential for an individual to establish their own career and family so that their parents can feel immense pride and gain faith, allowing them to proudly declare their child's achievements to others, which is highly valued. Even now, in every country and every ethnicity, people from every place really do have different customs. Those of you who have traveled to many places may notice this point and think that this is their way of thinking. But actually, that's not necessarily the case. It might just feel that way. Now, the third point is, filial piety begins with serving one's parents, continues with serving one's ruler, and ends with establishing oneself. There's another aspect of filial piety. At the very beginning, in front of your beloved parents, you should serve them diligently, show them respect, and always be filial. Then, in the middle stage, toward your leaders, teachers, and in front of your ruler, you should also be very loyal, very respectful, and obedient. This is something that the previous precious guru also mentioned. Be respectful to those above you, harmonious with your peers, and caring toward those below you. That's the idea here. Some people don't understand this at all. Especially nowadays, people are currently heavily influenced by Western culture. Western culture is more casual. They may not necessarily show respect to their leaders. Even children as young as 3 or 4 treat the president the same way. When I was in France, there was a small child, just a few short years old, who said, "Karama's behavior is truly very bad, so I absolutely will not vote for him." At that time, I really wanted to laugh out loud. Back then, I genuinely thought that many presidents around the entire world are indeed like this. Some children are like this, and when people like this grow up, maybe in China, including in some companies or even among school leaders and administrators, leaders expect those below them to be well behaved and obedient. Some leaders are different, though. Some leaders are willing to accept anyone below them as long as they have wisdom. Some people may not be wise, but as long as they are especially respectful, they are accepted. Sometimes the heads of various departments are also like this too. These leaders also have their own distinct differences. Actually, it's best if someone isn't especially obedient to you, but still has significant wisdom and valuable ability. It's better to keep such people. This is one of my tips. If that's the case, sometimes I have a lot of people who aren't respectful to me, and I might have to fire many of them. But I think even though they're not respectful to me and have a particularly bad attitude toward me, when I see them on the road, they always look like they hate me. It's true, when someone hates me like that, I feel uncomfortable. I've taught so much Dharma, yet they still hate me. What's the point? But I have no reason to fire them, and I won't fire them. So in some of our departments, when it comes to certain leaders, if the people under you are obedient, even if they lack wisdom ability, They're indeed good people. But if someone has a bit of personality, especially intellectuals, when they show a bit of individuality and they're not good to you, you just let them go. You fire them with just one sentence. That's not good. The people below also don't really understand Confucian culture. If they understood Confucian culture, even if they didn't feel much respect in their hearts, at least on the surface, they would certainly say some words of praise. Leader, you are truly remarkable and exceptional. We all feel especially honored. Under your wisdom, under your radiance, we are truly so very fortunate. That's precisely how it should be said. It sounds much better. It starts with one's parents, then in the presence of leaders. And ultimately, one should truly achieve great success and have a fulfilling career of their very own. In the end, relying on one's own abilities, one attains personal achievements and success. These are the three levels of the meaning of filial piety. Then, as in our Buddhist tradition, a scriptural reference is cited below. The book Daya says, "Never forget your ancestors, diligently cultivate their virtues." That's also called the Book of Songs, right? That Daya section. What kind of scriptural reference does it cite? It says Wunyan. Wu means no matter what, no matter where you are. And Nian means to always remember, to never, ever forget. Then Erzu refers to your revered ancestors, your esteemed forebears, all those who came before you in your lineage. Yushu Juede, you should mean to diligently follow. Ju means to conscientiously practice. And Ju profoundly signifies tradition, cultural inheritance, and other similar concepts, things like that. The meaning here is that you must never, no matter where or when you are or what your circumstances are, no matter what, you must always remember what your ancestors have passed down to you. You should follow, you should emulate what your ancestors have handed down. These are very valuable, excellent virtues, the enduring virtues that have been passed down. So this particular sentence is very important. We truly hope that everyone will remember this today as well. Because if you remember this, in fact, we really need this kind of thing. Whether you are a monastic or a layperson, whether you are part of an ethnic group or a religion, you have your own fine traditions. And these fine traditions, wherever we go, it's best not to forget them. Especially for those of you who are currently studying abroad in the Western countries, specifically, it seems that many international students have forgotten their own roots. Indeed, different ethnic groups all have their own customs, cultures, and religions. There are things that are extremely precious, but they have all been forgotten. So you see, the scriptural evidence cited here is actually very good. No matter where you are, no matter when or where or what you become, it is best if what your ancestors have passed down to you, these very meaningful and indeed very important traditions, please do not ever forget them. For example, for us Buddhists, we should not forget what was passed down by the Buddha, Nagarjuna Bodhisattva and Shantideva Bodhisattva. If you follow Confucianism, then you should not forget the teachings of Confucius and Mencius. If you are a Taoist, then Taoism also has its own teachings. For example, the Taishan Ganying Pian and some of their treatises, as well as the profound sutra on the profound kindness of parents. They also have their own sacred scriptures. So these kinds of things are truly very meaningful and deeply significant. There are many esteemed senior Dharma masters and wise professors who teach these principles, who value and love traditional culture very, very much. Moreover, they don't just talk about it, they truly put it into practice in their actions. They work to protect or preserve our traditional culture. So today, all of us present here today as well, regardless of whether you are a very lay person or a dedicated monastic, whether you have faith or not, it doesn't matter. We should not simply and uncritically follow certain specific aspects of modern Western culture, but rather evaluate them thoughtfully. If one were to completely discard all of these profoundly valuable traditions and cultural treasures that have been preserved and passed down for thousands of years, it would become genuinely impossible to recover them in the end. Therefore, I believe this content serves as a final crucial summation of the matter. It's also a piece of advice for everyone. He quoted a classical text, meaning that in ancient times, people may have used such references to scriptures to remind us to always remember the value of traditional culture. That's all for this particular part.
ahum bandırgara badna sadırdı. Ahum bandırgara badna sadırdı. Ahum bandırgara badna sadırdı.